How will the Bahamas navigate its energy future amidst a global crisis? Today, we dive into the ambitious reforms aimed at transforming our energy landscape, from solar power expansion to LNG implementation and grid modernization. Join us as we explore how these innovations will not only stabilize our power supply, but also pave the way for a sustainable, resilient future. This is Future-Proofing Bahamian Energy, from solar to LNG and beyond. Keep watching. A brand new episode of You and Your Money starts now.
You and Your Money is brought to you by NIB and Leno Corporate.
Welcome to You and Your Money, everyone. Joining us today to talk about harnessing solar power, expanding renewable energy in the Bahamas is the Energy and Transport Minister, JoBeth Coleby-Davis. Minister Coleby-Davis, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here.
Now, Mr. Coleby-Davis, how is the government planning to implement utility-scale solar power projects in the Family Islands?
So the government launched a request for proposal sometime late last year, and the plan was to have hybrid microgrids with the incorporation of solar panels and battery storage energy. And so the Family Islands had really good responses. Many of our respondents are 100% Bahamian owned, and majority of them at least 60% Bahamian owned. And so they will be incorporating solar panels on the Family Island that brings in some form of renewable energy and coupled that with the use of cleaner fuel LNG in the microgrids. And so that's how we plan to start incorporating renewables into our grid and allowing that to be a part of our energy solution.
So what are some of those key steps that you would say that are being taken to expand the solar energy projects here in New Providence?
So similarly, the government also did a request for companies to put together proposals for them to produce solar energy for New Providence. Okay. And what we did was we looked at various locations. We attached about 5 sites to our request for proposal for renewables. And what we found was that the demand, we couldn't put too much into the system because we already have a generation through our fuels. And so the renewable is like a support, and it also helps to keep the costs down. And so our plan is to start with an incorporation of 70 megawatts that will be generated from our solar panels. And we'll also have battery storage to support the solar, because while we do have a lot of sun, we don't have it 24/7, because first of all, we have nighttime. Mm-hmm. And secondly, we get a lot of cloud cover in the Bahamas. So yes, we're beautiful, sun, sand, and sea, but we still get a lot of cloud cover. Compare us to a place like Malta, where sometimes they don't have one cloud for like 3 months. So that's a lot of sun. So because of that, we have to do our solar panels with battery storage, because otherwise, once the cloud covers the solar panels and blocks the sun from connecting to the solar, there will be a shock to the system, to the grid, because the power automatically stops producing from the solar. So when you have cloud cover, the battery allows that transition of the energy to slowly allow our grid to kick in on the generation that's being produced on our fuel. So solar is still a benefit to our energy system, but it's a little tricky because we don't get all of the sun we really would like to have. And so our plan is to have solar with battery storage on New Providence, and we'll be producing 70 megawatts. We already have about 25 megawatts of battery at our Blue Hill power plant, and so that will be supported by the solar panels as well, and we hope to have those started by the end of this year.
Now, how will these solar initiatives contribute to the overall reliability and affordability of energy in the Bahamas?
When we're generating right now our energy sector, we use fuel. So fuel like HFO, which is heavy fuel oil, okay, and ADO, which is automotive diesel oil. And the diesel is way more expensive than the fuel oil, but the fuel oil is much dirtier. So that is a cost. That's a fuel charge that everyone has to bear. So when you look at your electricity bill, you have a fuel charge that BPL passes through to consumers because you utilize whatever amount of fuel that you utilize when you put a demand on the system by flicking on your switch and getting light. That is a part of your usage, is a fuel charge. So the solar is just the solar panels, and what it produces energy from is what's natural, the sun. That cost is much less because there isn't an extra fuel charge. And so starting with the incorporation of a renewable helps us to be able to provide the energy that's being demanded by the consumer at a lower price, and then bringing on more cleaner fuel and more affordable fuel also helps us to bring in lower fuel costs to the consumer, which also brings down the cost of electricity.
In what ways will expanding solar power help the Bahamas to achieve its climate goals?
First, the expansion is very new, and it brings us into the conversation of many other countries in the region who have been trying to respond to the demand that globally has been placed on everyone. We are faced with a lot of hurricanes, and a part of that has to do with what we see happening in our climate and making sure that we're climate resilient and making sure that we are responding with the rest of the global sector to incorporate more renewables and to incorporate cleaner fuel helps us to make sure that we're doing our part. And so our goal is to have at least 30% renewables to our grid by 2030. And we have started a little late, and so that's why you would see our energy reform plan is a little bit more aggressive. We also want to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions at the same time. Okay. Now, you have a lot of countries that are making commitments to be net zero. The Bahamas has just been talking about the reduction of our GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, and also incorporation of renewables. And so hopefully we're able to achieve 30 by 2030. And that's all of this energy reform and what we're implementing now is going to help us to get as close as possible to our goal.
Good stuff. What role do you see solar energy playing in the future sustainability of the Bahamas' energy sector?
Well, I would say solar is going to be a great contributor to helping us to be sustainable, but also to reduce the cost and also to be able to incorporate energy sources from renewables in a way that's cleaner and more supportive to our climate. And it also helps to teach our consumers that they can also add solar to their mix at home. Some persons have already taken advantage of that and put solar panels as a part of their energy mix on their roof. They've had solar water heaters incorporated in their homes, and that helps them to understand energy conservation, to reduce the wastage, and also to bring their costs down, because the investment sometimes at the beginning may seem hefty, right, but later on you benefit from it because you realize that what you are pulling from the grid is way less. And so your cost and your monthly bill is way less than much of everyone else because you are using the energy produced from the sun through your solar panels. And then when nighttime comes, you pull a little bit from the grid. And that's not a lot because usually people are up at night between 8 to 11, I would say. So usually that's maybe like 3 or 4 hours, and the cost is much lower. So I think the incorporation of solar generally from the government taking the lead helps to teach our consumers that they can also be a part of the change that we want to see in our energy source, and it helps them to reduce their costs on their own.
Well, we definitely want to take part in what it is, the initiatives in terms of having to reduce the overall cost for the individuals as consumers.
Yes.
Minister Coleby-Davis, we have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will look at modernizing infrastructure, grid upgrades, and transmission enhancements. This is You and Your Money. We'll be right back.
What? The luncheon?
Why you always worried about food? No, about how we gotta pay a little more for national insurance.
Mildred, you talking fool. I can't afford to pay that.
And you're always crying, palm out. Ain't gonna be much. Boss still gotta pay. 1st of July 2024. Oh, I can't wait to get my little extra pension.
You ain't lie about that, you know. I think that's what did help my boy Tony
Oh, yeah?
during the pandemic. That same unemployment benefit. And guess what?
What?
Susan, I think she'd get a pregnancy benefit, eh?
You mean maternity benefit, eh? So now, we gotta do our part to make sure we get our pension. All right, well, let me try and go back to agency, boss.
Welcome back to You and Your Money, everyone. In this segment, I'll still be speaking with Energy and Transport Minister JoBeth Coleby-Davis, and we'll be discussing modernizing infrastructure, grid upgrades, and transmission enhancements. Now, Minister Coleby-Davis, what are the main objectives of modernizing the electricity grid in New Providence?
So when I spoke in the budget contribution, I talked about our 5 reforms that we're seeking to achieve. I want to make sure that it's clear that none of our reforms, none of the incorporation of renewables, the transition to LNG would be possible except this one reform is a part of that conversation. That is the modernization and upgrade of our transmission and distribution system. So it's a race against the clock globally to get our transmission and distributions upgraded around the world. Every country is now looking at how they can get this achieved, what they can do, because the energy sector is moving so fast ahead of everyone. And there's new inventions and new reforms coming out almost daily now. And so in order to keep up with the times, in order to meet the demands that's been placed on the system, you have to be able to reform your transmission and distribution to respond. So what we see here in the Bahamas is we have a system that's aged. I mean, it's completely outdated. It's about 50, 60 years old, and many of them are supposed to be utilized for about 30 to 40 year run. So in most cases, we're on a system that's already 20 years over the time that it should be. We have transformers that are quite old, that's not even being made anymore. So if something was to happen to these transformers, one in particular is about 60 plus years old. If that goes bad, we lose about 25%, power to about 25% of New Providence. And so this upgrade is crucial because we cannot add anything to the system except we're able to accommodate it. And accommodate it means we need to have a more stabilized and more resilient grid. So we're looking to upgrade our substations. That's upgrading those same transformers that I spoke about, providing newer equipment, newer material, upgrading our transmission lines so that it's large enough to carry the load. So sometimes you would hear in the energy conversation that we have a lot of line loss. I think we have about probably 20 to 30% line loss. That means that your line is too small to pack in and transmit the power and the demand that's being pulled to come through to generate and service the areas that is requesting that demand. So you have hotels on our system, you have now Airbnbs, you have apartments, you have marinas, you have ports, you have everyone saying we need energy, we need to be able to supply and service and carry out our day-to-day business. And the demand has grown tremendously. So the economy is booming, it's growing, there's investment all over the Bahamas. And so people are saying, yeah, I need to now connect the power to my building. I need to now get light on when I hit the switch. But no one is thinking about, well, how that light gets to you through our transmission and distribution system, which was made to accommodate the demand 30 plus years ago. So we're looking at 30 years of growth on a system that didn't think New Providence or wasn't built to prepare New Providence for the sort of growth we've seen. We're also going to be hearing about a looping of our system. So looping means sometimes you have power outages and it shuts down a large portion of New Providence. But it may not have to if we have a looped system, because you could reroute and regenerate power to certain areas and protect wherever the fault is, that the power outage just is at that fault area. So looping our system gets us to keep a larger percentage online while we deal with that particular challenge or fault that we have at the line. Then we're going to be looking at upgrading and providing substation protectors. So the protectors kind of do the same thing. It protects and it guards that a fault only happens on this line in this area, and it doesn't transition to other areas and cause those outages and that line loss and that fault to spread to larger portions of New Providence and other areas that really don't have a fault. So these are foundational upgrades, but they're tremendously a greater portion of what needs to be done to be able to support what we want to bring onto the system, but also support some of the demand growth that we're seeing happen right now. And lastly, we're going to be increasing the amount of megawatts that can go onto our transmission line. And so that allows the growth that we would see happening now and the growth that we would see happen later in the future. And so that's really why these upgrades are key and very important.
Well, we definitely appreciate that, we're looking at the upgrades and what they can do for us here in New Providence and, of course, across the Bahamas. Now, Minister, how will these grid upgrades enhance the efficiency and the overall reliability of our electricity supply?
So our upgrades will be providing more support to our transmission of energy and the demands that we're seeing. So I brought with me some props. I've been using these throughout my budget communication because I want to be able to help the Bahamian public to see and understand what we are, where we're at now and where we're transitioning. So if I hold them together, then you may be able to see the difference in size of these transmission lines. These are examples of what we would be using. So the smaller one is what exists now. And this carries about 107, I think, amps. So quite small, not really a lot, and not that heavy. But when you heard me speak about line loss, it's because if I'm trying to fill, just imagine, I used an example of pool. Imagine me trying to fill a large swimming pool with this size hole that usually just fills up a kiddie pool, right? It's gonna take so long, so long. The demand on my hose will be great. But think about trying to get this large size of power through this small line. That's where you'd have line loss, because whatever can get through will get through on this line, and whatever cannot will be lost. And so that also causes our cost to go up, because we're pulling more fuel, but the energy isn't really being transmitted because some of it is being lost along the way because the line can't sustain it and can't take it on. So we're hoping to upgrade to this size transmission line, which is much, much larger, and should be able to carry a greater load of energy, more demand, and avoid having so much line loss. And I believe that, I'm told by the technical, I sometimes speak technical, but I'm not, but I'm told that it should be able to add an additional 170 megawatts to our system. So it will be able to take on all of what already exists on our system, about 320 megawatts it can take on, and it'll add an extra 170 megawatts, which means we have expansion, growth, support for the future. So this will be able to bring in the resiliency, the stability, reliability, because you won't have that line loss that you're experiencing. You'll be able to get the power in a stable way, and it's stronger, it's thicker, and so it can be more resilient for the system that we're trying to build and upgrade to. And so that's what we would hope to achieve with our upgrades, being able to bring more of resiliency, but more stability in our supply and meeting the demands of our people without putting so much strain on our system, which increases the cost to the consumer.
Well, as a consumer, I can surely say that I am looking forward to the time when all of this is all completed. And I can say that, you know something, I could truly see the impact this has made on my bill and overall life quality.
As a consumer, I also agree that I will be looking forward to benefiting from these upgrades, which we hope to have soon rather than later.
Minister, in what ways will modernizing the grid support the Bahamas' climate and sustainability goals?
So when I spoke about resiliency, having that resilience system is really, really important. That's the key, because you don't want every time we have a little wind blow, a little rain, and we experience it now, so we can laugh about it.
Right.
But it is frustrating, because you should be able to sustain in this particular location, because we know the Bahamas is prone to having those tropical storms, to having hurricanes. We want to have a resilient system. As much times as we have those faults and those failures and those disruptions, that's a great cost to the government, because we have to find a way to be able to achieve that, respond to that, and get everyone back online. And so having a resilient system is key in being able to keep your country moving in the midst or after a storm right away, have your economy back on track so that the revenue doesn't stop for a great length of time and causes so much strain on the financial person. So the key thing with these upgrades is to be able to bring about that resiliency, but also reliability of your system. You want to have a reliable system. We're growing as a country. Our economy is growing. We want to be able to respond to the growth with reliability. So how can we brag and say tourism numbers are up, but then we have such a faulty energy system, which causes people to say, well, I'm not coming back because I really had a disruptive vacation, because so much times I saw the power in and out, flickering off and on. So these things contribute, but to the climate resiliency is really the key, and that brings the stability, the reliability, and the cost down. But I would say to be able to respond to our climate goals, the part that will assist with that during these modernizations upgrades is resiliency of our system, and resiliency is key.
Well, Minister Coleby-Davis, we have to take another break. And when we get back, we'll talk about innovative energy solutions, LNG implementation, and equity rate adjustment. This is You and Your Money. We'll be right back.
Thanks, Michelle.
Hey, congratulations on your new promotion.
Even I was surprised.
What are you going to do with that new windfall of yours?
You mean like investing in stocks and bonds?
Yes, you might want to consider investing in mutual funds. Monies are pooled to invest in financial assets that fit your investment profile. Start your journey to financial freedom.
How do you know all this? What's Leno?
Welcome back to You and Your Money. Energy and Transport Minister JoBeth Coleby-Davis is here to speak with us. And in the previous segments, we spoke about harnessing solar power, expanding renewable energy in the Bahamas, and modernizing infrastructure, grid upgrades, and transmission enhancements. In this segment, I want us to talk about innovative energy solutions, LNG implementation, and equity rate adjustment. Mr. Coleby-Davis, how does the government plan to implement LNG as a key component of New Providence's energy generation?
So coupled with bringing renewables onto our system and bringing that to help with the reduction of costs, we're also seeking to have a transition fuel, which is LNG. And that transition fuel would also be a cleaner fuel. It'll be more cost effective. And so our introduction of LNG would be phased over 4 phases. The first one would be 60 megawatts added onto the system, and then we'll incorporate another 30, which will bring that to 90 megawatts, and then there'll be an incorporation of a combined cycle that has 2 steam engines. What that does is that captures the steam that's produced from the engines that is producing the LNG, and those 2 steam engines also utilize the steam and produce energy. And so that would be adding an additional 50 onto the system, and then the last phase would be a larger plant at the Blue Hill Power Plant that is able to incorporate about 175 megawatts added with all of those. And so the total end game is to have about 175 megawatts and BPL adding 2 more of their engines, converting 2 more of their engines with LNG. So it's a transitional fuel because we're going to incorporate it piece by piece until we're able to fully take use of a larger portion of that, which helps with bringing costs down and is more of a cleaner fuel.
Can you explain the equity rate adjustment and its significance for achieving affordable energy?
So the equity rate adjustment actually gets to us achieving and bringing costs down gradually at the first part, because all of these projects will take some time, about 9 to 12 months out for the larger ones, and then about 6 to 9 months for the smaller ones. And so bringing the cost down was a priority for the vulnerable society, for the government. And so we're looking to have the first 200 kilowatt hours reduced to 0 at your base rate. And so I have to be specific to base rate because you still have a fuel charge that's passed through to consumers. Remember, I spoke about utilizing the fuel to meet the demand. When you turn on that switch at home, that's pulling a particular fuel through the transmission and distribution line that produces the energy to be able to power up your home. So there's still a fuel charge component, but the base rate of your 0 to 200 kWh would be 0. And you can check your bill at the end of July because that's when it should be documented on your bill. And it's every residential customer. And then the other categories that saw a decrease was the commercial, small to medium business saw a decrease of their base rate, and also our temporary supply saw a decrease of their base rate. And then we had the general service, which is our larger companies. It's about 300 companies that is captured under that general service. It's really, really large demand on the system. They would have saw a little bit of an increase, but the government hasn't had a tariff rate adjustment since 2010. So this is an exercise to bring a little bit of equity to our rates, tariff rates, but also to bring some support to our vulnerable in society and let them begin to see a gradual decrease of their bills.
Well, I definitely appreciate that the government has not forgotten the vulnerable side of our community and seeing what can be done to actually give help all around. Now, how will these changes in energy generation help the Bahamas meet its climate and sustainable goals?
So I think the first part is having these conversations are really important. So thanks again for inviting me, because it helps our public to understand and begin to incorporate how they use energy at home and how they generate and what demands they put on the system so that they can begin to learn energy conservation. That's the first part. That's also very important because it's key in educating our consumers. But bringing LNG into our system, it's a cleaner fuel. So remember, we're trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. That's a part of our climate goals. So we're bringing on the renewables through solar, and then we're doing the reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions. LNG would help us to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. It's much cleaner of a fuel, and so that's important to incorporate as a transitional fuel to help us be able to meet our climate goals.
Well, Minister Coleby-Davis, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you.
The future of Bahamian energy is bright, with bold reforms leading the way. These initiatives promise to transform our energy landscape, ensuring sustainability and resilience for generations to come. Before you go, we want to hear from you. Scan the QR code on the screen to give us your feedback. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, keep innovating and exploring new horizons in energy.
You and Your Money was brought to you by NIB and 𝗪𝗏𝗧𝗛𝗏.